You're listening to Remotely We Are One, a podcast to help inspire others to take their lives back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a passionate beer rep who loves the industry but hates the commute.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds exciting. Let's clock in. I'm still stuck on Montreal. I proposed to my wife in Montreal.
Oh, great.
Oh, nice.
Where did you propose to your wife?
Where
in Montreal?
Oh, I was in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral.
Oh, shit.
That's awfully Catholic. That makes sense.
Well,
yeah.
You know what I did? This quick little story. I'll tell you. She went up there with her best friend for like a little bachelorette party because they all used to go to Montreal. Yeah. And I posed as a street performer. Yeah, I had my guitar and I stood underneath the statue there and the monument, and they rounded the corner, and there I was.
It's the whitest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, you must really love your wife. And I'm saying that as a compliment. We actually had so for the first Running Remote conference, one of the speakers was planning on proposing to his now wife, and we're like, okay, well, we can help you with this. Like, we could get like a string quartet, we could get everything, and we could get it all done. Like, you could do it on stage. So we prep everything, and then about 2 hours beforehand, he's like, we got to cut it. We got to cut the entire thing. And I was like, what do you mean we got to cut the entire thing? I just paid for a fucking band, dude. Like, this is the thing. Like, this is the moment that I'm super stoked about. And he's like, dude, can't do it. She's not feeling it today. Like, it's not the right day. I'm like, it's the right day, man. It's the right day.
It's
and
happening.
He's like, no, it's not the right day. And then I was like, come on.
Welcome back, everybody, to Remotely We Are One. I am Rick, your host, joined by my co-host, Kaleem. Hey, bud.
Hey, man. How you been, man? How you feeling?
I feel great. It's like maybe 70 degrees here, not a cloud in the sky, and I get to hang out with you guys today, so I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, likewise. We learned a lot about our guests in the show. So the first thing, he's representing Montreal, Canada right now. That's where he's at. How's it up in Montreal?
It's cold. It's really cold, but it's going to get warmer pretty soon.
It's going to get
bit
warmer.
of a delayed effect, right? So whatever it is, pretty much anywhere in the United States, the next week, it's that temperature in Canada.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Something else that we learned and had a great time talking about is he was a professional ice dancer until the age of 20. How is that possible? How did you keep yourself in shape? How many people did you lift up?
Oh, man, that's an interesting question. Probably lifted tens of thousands of girls throughout my career, to be completely honest with you. I ended up breaking my leg, actually, and that's why I got out of it. And it was about the age of 20, I saw my body melt away from
well done. Melt away.
5.5% body fat to let's get fat and eat peanut butter sandwiches for about 6 months while my knee repaired itself. It was a very dark time in my life, to be completely honest with you.
I mean, professional ice dancing, it's not an easy sport, everyone. It's not an easy sport. Okay, number 3, I learned about, you were just recently named one of the top 150 remote work influencers by remotework.com. Congratulations. And you're the founder of Time Doctor, which we're going to talk about. And last but not least, you're the co-founder of, I think, the world's largest remote conference, Running Remote. Everyone, listeners, viewers, please give a warm welcome to Liam Martin. Yeah! Yeah!
That felt very, very weird.
It was awkward. I'll give you that.
I'm here to answer all of your questions connected to remote work. Hopefully I can open up some of them, or we can talk about my skating career.
No, I mean, skating's super cool. Skating's super awesome. You're our second guest who has been involved in the skating industry. So it's kind of interesting, actually. But we did a little homework, Rick. We do some homework on our guest. And I was scrolling through the good old LinkedIn, and I noticed like myself, I started my professional career in higher education. And I was looking on your profile and I noticed that you started kind of your career in higher education as a researcher and a teacher's assistant. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was
That
it?
is true. I'm looking at my master's degree right now. It's on my wall.
So, what's your master's in?
It's in sociology. So I went to grad school at McGill University, ended up actually teaching there as well as being a TA. And for those that haven't been to university or college before, most first and second year classes end up being taught by graduate students. And so I taught my very first class, started with about 300 students, ended up with less than 200 by the end of the semester, and the worst academic reviews in the history of the department. The department had been in operation for about 136 years, so it wasn't very good. I ended up walking into my supervisor's office and I said, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he said, no, you are not. And then I said, so what do you think I should do? And he said, you've got to get pretty good at this, like, teaching thing, because you got to do that for the next 10 to 20 years before you get to do anything fun. And 6 weeks later, I threw a master's thesis under his door and I was out into the real world. Thankfully, it only took me 9 years of education and a master's degree to recognize that I didn't need to continue on with academia.
Kudos, sir.
I don't want to bring it down any more than that, but that was also kind of a shitty part of my life.
You know, it's funny. Some of those life lessons, you know, they're a slap in the face in the moment, but they turn out to be the most valuable down the road.
Absolutely. I think some of my biggest failures, looking back on it 5 years later, thank God I failed at that, because it actually took me in a direction that just really was for the better. And for anyone that's in one of those slumps right now, recognize it'll get better. You just have to reapply yourself to something else.
One thing I've learned, I've had a lot of different experiences. Some of them were not as fortunate as others, but in life, there are no such things as losses. There are only lessons.
Well done. I like that. You hear that, people? Get inspired when you listen on this podcast. Get inspired. We're telling stories.
Liam, since we're on the subject of experience, you've had a lot of them. So what was the spark that made you transition to remote work and the concept of Time Doctor?
So right after I got out of grad school, I actually ended up starting my first online business, which was a tutoring business. So I would tutor people through Skype, and ended up turning that into a business that I had a lot of employees throughout North America and Europe that I was contracting out to be online tutors. Mm-hmm. And the issue that I ran into was I'd bill a student for 10 hours, and then the student wouldn't come back to me and say, I didn't work with my tutor for 10 hours. I worked with them for 5. I'd go to the tutor and say, did you work with Jimmy for 10 hours? He said, of course, I billed you for 10 hours. I'd end up having to refund the student for 5 hours and pay the tutor the full 10 hours. And that ended up losing me money in the transaction. This was really destroying the business. And then my now business partner, Rob, who's the CEO of the company, we really just looked at this and we said, wow, this is going to completely solve this problem for us, which at that point was a huge hole in the market, because 12 years ago, remote wasn't what it was today.
Absolutely not.
I mean, you couldn't even, 15 years ago, when I started the online tutoring business, we were running everything through Skype, and Skype maybe worked 50% of the time. Like, there just wasn't even the infrastructure in place to be able to actually execute on these, but we knew that there was something there. So we ended up building that tool, ended up building a couple other tools in the remote workspace. And then that obviously led me to the Running Remote conference, which was my personal frustration with trying to figure out how to actually have remote companies be taken seriously. So I think probably you guys know this better than most, but pre-pandemic, 4% of the US workforce was working remotely pre-pandemic. By March of 2020, it was 45% of the US workforce. That's the biggest transition in work since the Industrial Revolution, but the Industrial Revolution took 80 years and we did it in March. So there was a massive shift, completely rewiring the way that we did work. And unfortunately, pre-pandemic, you know, a lot of people, you'd say, oh, well, I run a remote business. Oh, isn't that cute? You run a remote business.
Sure you do.
Have a cookie, right? Like, you know, the big one, it's at least in the venture-backed world, was lifestyle business. That's very triggering for me even today. You know, people would say, oh, you have a great lifestyle business, man. It's like, no. To be honest with you, there are tons of companies, and we have them coming to the Running Remote conference all the time, that are multi-billion-dollar remote first companies that have never had an office and are actually better run than the vast majority of on-premise companies because they are remote. So that was really the impetus for the Running Remote conference, is trying to basically build that out as one of the other businesses that I run.
Liam, I'm going to back up though. I'm going to stay with Time Doctor for a second because I got a couple questions. Roughly what year did you start Time Doctor? I can't do the math 12 years back.
2011.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm just totally curious. Like, I love the story about the challenge that you had of proving that you were working on this project for the clients. I've talked about this a few times on a couple different episodes about the importance of trust in remote work. If you're a company, and you know, when we advise clients and stuff like that, we talk about trust and how important it is, and if you have to assume trust versus trust is earned. With Time Doctor, I noticed that it has a whole bunch of great features, awesome features in there. One of the features I noticed was screen monitoring. It's kind of, you know, it's not listed very high, but it is a feature that is in there. I mean, obviously you have this feature in your product, and I'm sure it works great for companies and certain purposes, but I'm just wondering, are you somewhat torn or divided from the idea of screen monitoring? What's your thought about screen monitoring keystrokes? What's your thought as far as a company who's going to implement that feature set?
So I think it's multivariate. There's a lot of variables that work into it. To just kind of discuss the history of where that comes from.
Yeah, for sure.
20 years ago, there was a platform called Elance and
yes. They're now Upwork now, right?
Yeah, Elance and there's the other company that
was
I can't
it
remember.
Freelancer?
They merged. Freelancer still exists. Okay. So there was Elance and Odesk.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Those two companies ended up merging into one company called Upwork. And now there's Freelancer, which is effectively the second biggest platform in the space. And then there's platforms like Fiverr. And earlier on in the ecosystem, it was absolutely a hard requirement to be able to do screenshots. So Elance, Odesk, and Freelancer, they all run screenshots still today. You need to be able to have that to be able to run the business. So when we started that business, it was really a tool to be able to say, listen, if you want to work with your remote workers long term, then they needed screenshots as part of that package to be able to continue on. I can tell you, for us personally, internally, we do not use screenshots because we don't think it actually improves the productivity of the worker. However, when we talk to a lot of our larger clients, from a compliance perspective, in the vast majority of cases, you require screenshots. Wow. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about actually at the Running Remote conference is really like the boring bureaucracy of remote work. And you need to, if you're HIPAA, SOC 2, or PCI compliant, you will require screenshots inside of your, and again, I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on podcasts, but you can talk to your lawyers if you have them inside of your companies, and they're required, right? So you need to be able to figure out, well, where did this file go? If someone steals some client's data, they need to be able to have an audit trail to be able to follow up on it. All contract work requires a tool like Time Doctor. This is the thing that I think not many people really recognize. Of course. The vast majority of workers right now, unfortunately, that are working remotely are non-compliant. So they're not, if you're a contractor, you need to actually have time tracking in place. It is a law in the United States. You need to have that. And if you don't, and the IRS decides to audit you, you're in a bunch of hot water. And more specifically, the employer is the one that's in hot water. We talked about remote.com, the list that I was on.
Yes.
That's an EOR, an employer of record company. There are so many companies or employees right now that they're living in San Francisco and they say, hey, we're going remote. Yeah, well, I moved to Texas. Can you, I'm a tax resident of Texas now, but no one ever moved to Texas. And there's a 12% state tax in California, which they're now jumping out of, and they're just becoming a tax resident of Texas, but they never actually moved there.
Oh, wow.
Who is actually going to be on the lam for that? It's the company.
Oh,
So
wow.
when you see a lot of these large companies that say, hey, well, we have to implement screenshots, or even more specifically, there's a case that's currently finishing up, and it looks like the plaintiff is going to win, which is someone broke their collarbone working from home in their home office. They ended up walking up some stairs and they were working from home. And the employer is going to get sued for an unsafe working environment. So you even have to be able to document your working environment to be able to say, let's take photos of everything. We're going to, look at your environment every month as an example to make sure that we've gone through the due diligence. And again, all of these precedents have not really kind of figured themselves out yet. But a lot of the times when I speak to a company that has like over 1,000 employees, I almost never talk to the founder, the CEO, the COO. It's the lawyers. It's like, well, we have like $80 billion worth of liability sitting on this remote work agreement here. So we need to be able to make sure that we're compliant. And for me, when I think about where we go from where we are right now, which is there's probably, and no one's really kind of come up with a global number, but I would probably say there's 500 million remote workers. Maybe there were actually 10% of those numbers pre-pandemic, but let's say there's 500 million remote workers now. How do you get to multi-billions of people? Well, you need to be able to make sure you go through these boring and sometimes problematic issues of what makes someone compliant for HIPAA. Well, you need to have screenshots in order to be able to do that. If you're handling medical records or financial information, you need to be able to have that technology in place. And the most popular job on planet Earth, what do you guys think it is?
I'm going to go with customer service.
Rick? Mr. Lehman, what do you think? I love, by the way, that Rick knows nothing about remote work, by the way.
He does. Don't let him fool you. He's a great actor and a voice actor, too. I mean, he's great all around. I said customer service, Rick. I said customer service.
I really don't know how to answer that.
Oh, come on. Just pick a job. Are you kidding me?
Customer service.
There it is.
It's a customer support rep.
Yes. I guess I kind of cheat. I shouldn't be in this situation.
Yeah, you would know. So it's a really interesting situation, which is like if you're doing customer support tickets in which you're handling financial information, credit card information, that kind of stuff, you need this technology. You need a form of that technology in order to actually run that position. And again, it's one of those things that when I look at where the industry is going, we have to pay attention to the bureaucracy of it, unfortunately. Okay. And that's a big part that we're serving there. So we don't personally use it ourselves, just to kind of give you context. We don't necessarily think it makes the employee productive in what we're currently doing, but we don't need to be HIPAA, PCI, or SOC 2 compliant. If we were, we would use it.
Wow.
Right. What I'm hearing basically is it's a liability thing. The human nature aesthetic of, the employees saying, well, that's screen monitoring. That's too big brother for me. I don't want to have anything to do with that.
I don't want that. Yeah. So I think there's two systems to go about this. At least for us, one of the core tenets is the employee will be able to see everything that is collected, number one. The employee can edit that data, meaning they can get rid of all that information. They can delete it. They control their data. And then the third one is they can turn it on and off. So those are the big pieces that we are really focused on. And that also makes us compliant in a lot more locations than someone who's doing it like coercively, as an example. Right. So that's something that you need to take into consideration. But fundamentally, and actually inside of that, even let's say that someone is trying to steal information out of the company, which, by the way, happens all the time. It's the number one source of theft. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's the internal employees. How do you actually control for that? And also, it's corporate espionage as well. Right, so being able to pull your secrets out of this company and then move it to somewhere else. You need to be able to, even with us being able to say, oh, well, the employee can control that data, it becomes very problematic because there are other industries that we go into in which we are non-compliant because the employee can actually remove that data without the employer basically controlling for that. So it's different niches and that kind of thing, but it's, just to explain it, it's very, very boring, but it is one of those tools that you need in order to get to billions of remote workers working remotely.
And I would imagine, Liam, you kind of hinted on it a little bit. You know, to quote the great Spider-Man, or what was his name? What's the uncle's name? Uncle Ben? Is it Uncle Ben?
Ben.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
He actually says it, right? Right. With great power comes great responsibility. Like, hopefully I got that right. All you comic people out there, correct me if I'm wrong. But obviously, you know, you want people to use it for the right thing versus using it for the wrong thing. And it sounds like to me, you all are using it for the right reasons and created it for the right reasons. And it can help avoid some of these huge legal challenges. So thank you for answering that. Because I know philosophically sometimes you can have a conflict with your own personal thoughts, and the fact that your own company doesn't use it is
Right.
very, very telling. So thank you.
Yeah, I would personally say, to me, if you don't need to use it, don't use it. But
Yep.
if you need to be compliant and you can't be remote without it, I mean, my banker, my personal banker, as an example, she could not do a wire transfer for the first 6 months that she worked from home after the pandemic, because she said, "Oh, well, I can't do it from my home computer." And I was like, "Why?" It's like, "Oh, my computer's not PCI compliant," which is the bank
Right.
level security that you
Right.
need in order to actually do it. And she'd actually have to go into the office once a week for like 3 hours, and they had people kind of like rotating.
Mm-hmm.
Just ridiculous. You need that technology in order to be able to get people that do banking, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
allowing them to work remotely. You need this tech in place.
Interesting.
So let's shine some light on running remote, if you will, for a few moments, and
Sure.
how you connected with your co-founder Igor Barushko. I hope I didn't butcher his name.
Yeah. Well, Igor worked for me, and
Mhm.
we
Oh, at Time Doctor, you mean?
at Time Doctor. Yeah.
Okay,
So he was
okay.
actually in charge of international search engine optimization.
Oh,
He was a
okay.
marketer. And we were in Boracay, which is the party island in the Philippines. And we had a big team retreat.
Wow.
So every single year, like a lot of remote first companies, we just fly everyone into one location every single year when it's not COVID.
Well
That
done.
year was in Boracay. And we started Googling stuff like, okay, so how do we get to 500 people or 1,000 people? How do we get to a big remote company? Because we were about 100 people at that time. And there was nothing. There was a whole bunch of information on how to hire a virtual assistant or how to outsource or how to be a digital nomad, but there was no information on how to build $1 billion plus company. And I had a ready, fire, aim philosophy, which was, I don't know if you know the Pareto principle, but the amount of work that you have expands into the time that you have to do it.
Say that one more time because we need, well, first off, I didn't get it. So I need to
Oh,
hear it
okay.
again. And I want our listeners to hear that phrase again. What did you say?
So the amount of work that you have
Mm-hmm.
expands into the time you have to do it. So if
Mm.
you say, I'm going to run a conference in 30 days, or I'm going to run a conference in 11 months, generally, you're going to actually not have that much of a delta between the quality of the 1 month event and the 11-month event. You're just going to
Yes.
figure out how to get it done.
Cor-
This is like
Correct. Yeah.
entrepreneurship cheat code 101, which is I just booked a venue. And I said, all right, I'm going to book a venue. I was in Bali, in Ubud, Bali. And worst case scenario, a couple friends of mine are going to come to speak at the conference. And I'll learn a lot about remote work if I end up losing, 100 grand or something like that. Thankfully, I didn't. We ended up actually making a very, very small amount of money. And
That's a success.
that was a success.
For all you event planners out there, if you don't lose money on your first 2 events, you're doing well.
Yeah, the standard kind of event thesis is you lose money on your first event, you break even on your second one, and you make money on the third.
Yeah.
So you've really got to build a brand up, and people have got to be like, hey, is that person legit?
Yeah. Yeah. And Liam, were there any other, like in your research? I mean, obviously you Googled other remote conference. I mean, I'm sure there were a couple here and there, but were there any others that were like really grabbing your attention or you didn't even care?
No, there were actually were. So that was
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest things that I look at, which is when I look at a new project, I go to first principles and critical thinking theory. And the last part of critical thinking, the last question that you should ask yourself is, what assumptions am I making from my conclusions?
Mm.
So I assumed that people would like to learn about remote work and building serious remote companies. That was my assumption built
And
into
what year
that.
is this again? I forgot
This
if
is
you've already mentioned it.
2018.
Okay.
2018, 2017, maybe.
Nice. Okay. Okay.
So there were two conferences that
Mm-hmm.
existed that tried. One was Nacho's conference in
Mm-hmm.
Gran Canaria, which is
Mm-hmm.
still running today. Actually, was just at it in November. Great conference, and he rebranded to Repeople. That's the name of the
Mm-hmm.
conference now. And then another conference was by Sarah Sutton from Flex Jobs,
Oh yeah, I remember
which
Sarah.
was yeah. And
Still
so
getting it
they
down.
ran a conference of about 100 people, relatively small one. And then there was another conference called the Yonder.io conference. And
Oh yeah.
Yonder.io is very old school. He doesn't run it anymore.
Jeff Robbins, Lullabot,
Yeah,
Laurel,
exactly.
Laurel, Laurel
Yeah.
Fire. Yeah,
So
definitely.
they ran another one as well, but two of the three failed. So I was like, oh man, well, that's not very good for my assumptions, which is probably people don't want to hear about this. And what I actually did when I analyzed this, and I told Sarah about this in depth. And Sarah is, by the way, she partners with Running Remote. You know, she's a sponsor and she comes and speaks at the conference almost every year. Is she was approaching the wrong demographic. She was approaching large corporate, so very, very large companies back in 2017, 2018, which were not ready for remote work. It was
No,
the young
no.
upstarts. It was the sub 100 seat organizations that were like, yeah, okay, I'm going to be. And what we recognized was tying into the market, which was very small, was remote first founders. So, and Amir
Oh
knows
god.
this, but Amir from Todoist is our customer avatar. So Amir, who's the CEO of Todoist, which is a task
Mm-hmm.
management app, he has about 150, 200 people that are distributed all over planet Earth. I ask Amir, hey, would you enjoy this guy speaking at the conference? And if he says no, we don't have him at the conference. He's our customer avatar. He's basically our person that we come to constantly saying, what would you do? What would you like to see? And we just reinforced it was like he's a remote first founder. He's been remote from day one. There's a good community that we could develop a following around that could support a conference at least of 500 to 1,000 people. Now it's actually changed quite a bit because, as we all know, remote work completely blew up.
and and then you couldn't get together, right? So then you do that
Yeah.
conference. It's success. I remember hearing about it. I thought it was very good. And I've been to, I think I want to say two of your conferences, and was
Mm-hmm.
able to speak at one of them. You have that first conference. You're high off success. So I'm assuming you go in 18, right? And then you have one in 19.
Yeah.
But what happens come March of
In
20?
2020.
So for all you event planners out there, you put a ton of money down for venues ahead of time.
Yeah. So the event was actually going to be April of 2020 in Austin, Texas. And
Wow. Oh, that would have been
so
awesome.
about 90 days out, all your accounts receivable usually has to be in for events. So
Yes.
your venue has to be paid. You got to pay for your chairs. You got to pay for your hotel block, your room block, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're doing all that stuff. And then around January, I did a piece with CNN International where I was talking about working from home in Hong Kong because there was this little virus that was, in China and creating problems, and they locked down Hong Kong. And there's a guy from the WHO there. And so I emailed him afterwards and I was like, so what's going on with this COVID stuff? And he's like, oh, that's pretty bad. And I was like, define bad. He's like, 5 to 15 million dead bad. And I was like, what? And he said,
Boy.
yeah, dude. And he said, not only that, none of this stuff is going to actually stop it from happening. Like he said in the email, the horse is already out of the barn, meaning
Oh my
this is
gosh.
going to happen. So I was acting like a conspiracy theorist about mid-January, and I actually wanted to cancel everything very early on.
Right.
But we had a lot of other companies that were going to sue us if we canceled the event, including the city of Austin and the state of Texas, because they didn't want
Of
the actual
course.
place to be, they wanted to say, hey, like the place is safe, right? Like we're going to run conferences here. So that ended up not going too well. When South by canceled, then we were able to cancel. But then I was left with about $250,000, in costs that we just basically couldn't recoup because we'd already paid them out. which was super frustrating.
Oh, tough.
But then we pivoted
tough.
into virtual, which ended up going really, really well. Hopin, which is also another company that Remote First Capital is invested in, of which I'm an LP. So full disclosure on that one, so that I'm not promoting Hopin. But we ended up running an event with them 6 months later, which is a platform for virtual events. Did really well. We had about 6,000 people that came to that event. And we went virtual for about a year and a half or 2 years. But I think in person is better. I'm going to be the first one to kind of say it. You got to be able to really just kind of have drinks with people, go out to dinner. For anyone that's really good at conferences and events, in my opinion, all your business is done at the dinners and the lunches and, the coffee breaks and all that kind of stuff, which you really are missing with
conferences are about connections. If you want to learn, you can learn. And I think your online conferences are amazing. The content's great. I thought that it was great. You can learn a ton on a remote conference. I love it. But like you're saying, people go to conferences, and I always say this, content third for priority, location and connecting with probably connecting with their colleagues and connecting in person, and then want to see the cool location where you're at. So I agree with you.
Yeah. So we're back to that. And I think that even though we're still in a pandemic, moving to an endemic stage, to me, people need to be able to get back together. And more importantly, they need this information more than ever. We're moving towards a stage now where post-pandemic, people are moving to hybrid, people are going back to the office, some people are staying remote, but in the vast majority of cases, I actually don't think that those people know remote work. So I talk a lot how we were in an office and then we went to work from home. Both of those are places. Remote is not a place. So it's a different philosophy. It requires a different managerial framework. And so that's connected to the book that I've been writing over the last year and a half with HarperCollins, focusing on the methodologies of remote work and how they're very different from a management philosophy from an actual in-office environment.
Well, I'm really excited about running remote. I'm hoping to go to Montreal. It's in April. Hopefully we get this podcast. No, I'm sorry. It's in May.
It's in May 17th and 18th.
There we go. I'm sorry. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get this episode out so some of y'all listeners can go and check it out. I'm hoping my passport comes in time so I can actually meet you in person, sir. So that'd be great.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Can you tell us about a comical or inspiring moment that you had while working remotely?
Yes. Do you want to hear it now, Rick?
I would love to.
I want to get as much dead air as humanly possible to make this as impactful as humanly possible. I had, this one is, I'm going to try to make sure that I keep names out of it.
I mean, listen, nothing wrong with names if you want.
Right. No, I just need to make sure that I don't get in trouble. I had 3 team members that ended up getting in a conflict at a bar and ended up going to jail.
Oh my goodness.
Because they got in a real serious bar fight. There was a woman there that one of my team members maybe was looking at, maybe wasn't looking at, but someone didn't really like them looking or not looking at said woman. And he said, I'm not looking at this woman, and nor would I. She's incredibly ugly, something to that effect. And it was just a huge bar fight that ended up happening. So the 3 of them are in holding, and I get a call on the emergency channel, which is the only, so there's an emergency channel on Slack, which rings all of our phones. It's the only channel that actually notifies everyone. So there better be a big serious problem. So I get this ring, and it's my executive assistant saying, hey, so I need $400 and no questions asked, because we need to get these guys out of jail. And we paid off the cops. It was in a country in which you could pay off cops, and
my goodness,
and got them back out. And then I had a meeting with them virtually on Zoom. And I said, so I'm not going to tell my business partner about this. I'm not going to tell Rob, who's the CEO of the company. I'm not going to tell him about this. This came out of my pocket, this money. But if this ever happens again, you're fired. Like, I give you 3 strikes in the company. You guys both have strikes. You have 1 strike. You can never get rid of your strikes. If you have 3 strikes, you're out. And yeah, that was a crazy experience for me. I have a bunch of others, but that's probably the biggest one that I remember, just being like, my God, how can I deal with this? Even just last week, I had a screaming match between 2 employees synchronously, which is why I actually suggest that the vast majority of communication happen asynchronously, because calmer heads usually prevail when you're async.
Wow.
Oh, like the basis of a Hollywood script.
I mean, I'm just glad that everything worked out, because like everything that was running through my head was, I was thinking Narcos, I was thinking, you know, The Godfather, I was thinking all sorts of things when you were talking about your story, like, hey, we're gonna pay the cops off, huh? We're gonna pay them off.
You know, it was interesting too, because at one of the events, I know a couple of the speakers wanted to try like ayahuasca, which is a drug consumed in places like Costa Rica and Bali, Indonesia. However, in Indonesia, drug use is highly illegal. There's an island in Indonesia called Execution Island, where they'll bring people and they'll execute you very quickly for drug usage. So for me, being the person that's responsible for everyone's safety, I said, absolutely not. This is not something like, you can do it on your own time, but I really, you know, let's get you through the conference before you do anything like that. And I found out that they ended up talking to someone else that ended up getting them some of this material. And I remember walking into one of the villas, and they're all kind of like laying down in a semicircle, just kind of like vibing with the universe. And I was like, what the hell did you guys do? Yeah, no, they were going through the portal. And I was like, who got them this? And it was, yeah, that's all I can say connected to that. There's lots of fun at the Running Remote conference for anyone that's interested in coming.
And there's portals. There's Scotty will beam you up. There's all sorts of things that run the remote. So thank you.
It's as close to living inside a cartoon as you can get. Liam Martin, thank you so much for your experiences and certainly for talking with us. Where can our listeners find you? Social media?
Everything and anything
website?
Is at runningremote.com. So tickets, the book, and then if you want to learn more about the conference content, YouTube's probably the best spot, youtube.com/runningremote. All of our talks go up there for free because our mission is trying to empower the world's transition towards remote work. So if you can't afford a ticket, you can just go to YouTube.
Awesome.
Thank you
You're
so
a super
much,
sport
sir.
for tolerating us and our warped senses of humor. Thank you.
Oh, this was a ton of fun. Thanks a lot for having
Good.
me.
Yeah. Come back anytime. You've been listening to the Remotely We Are One podcast. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.